about some other things, like not parental mental illness or disabilities? What about perceptions and cognitions? Do people who abuse their kids think differently than people who don't abuse their kids? So I threw this stuff up here, but it's not terribly important. You know, this was an idea that started in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Maybe they don't think like we think. And so that's why they abuse, because they just don't think the way we do. And so you compare the attitudes of abusers with non-abusers, parental attitudes. And believe it or not, you typically don't find any differences. Like, I give you a parenting questionnaire, I give an abusive mom a parenting questionnaire about children and attitudes about child rearing. No difference. But, so we said, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, it turns out that we're kind of going about it the wrong way. The newer studies now look at parents' perception, not of parenting, but of their child. Their real child, and how they perceive their real child. So let me give you a couple of these. So, this is a study. They asked moms to rate their children's behaviors on a variety of scales. Okay? And then the researchers also observed the kids and coded their behavior. So you've got mom's perception of Junior, and then you have a team that's blind to anything, what mom thinks, and they observe and rate the child's behavior. And what they found was that moms who had been had open CPS cases reported more problems with their children than the researchers saw. Okay? So the observers didn't see this, but the moms reported it. Why is that important? Because if she thinks he's rotten, then even, well, and you saw that happening a little bit with, Autumn, right? Her mom, I mean, even when Autumn tried to do nice things, her mom perceived it, you know, as her doing something bad. When she squished the berry, yes, that was bad, but then she grabbed a napkin and she tried to wipe it up. But her mom didn't perceive the good, she only perceived the bad. And so she put her in timeout. So there you go. This perception of this perception about what the child is doing. Here's another study. Response to infant cries. What they did was they had moms, abusive moms and non-abusive moms, listen to recordings of babies crying. Okay. So, and they then took some physiological measures, heart rate and everything with the mom as she's listening to these babies crying. Also had them fill out scales about what the cry was about. Okay? So why do babies cry? Hungry? Diaper change? Tired? Bored. I mean, that seems, or for no reason at all sometimes, right? It just seems that way, right? But we usually use the infant cry as a signal that possibly baby is distressed, right? And so that's a signal to do something. Check the diapers, no, you know, are you hungry? You know, that kind of thing. And what they found was the abusive moms rated the cries as more annoying and less as a call to help. A lot of us think of a cry as like, now I have to go help the baby. They found the crying more annoying, and they had less sympathy for the infant. So they're irritated by crying. How many babies cry?
All of them.
All of them? Yes, all of them. Okay? So these moms then are less attuned and more annoyed by crying. Also, the physiological measures supported the fact that they were much more aroused by infant crying than non-abusive moms. It was irritating to them. So now we've got something that's more subtle. It's not because I'm sure you can point out, not every abusive, and very few abusive people have a mental illness or an intellectual disability, but now you're talking about something different, something more subtle. I'm going to throw another one out to you. Emotion recognition. Do abusive parents have difficulty with emotion recognition? Why is emotion recognition important? So you can respond appropriately, right? I need to know. And interestingly, okay, so they showed positive and negative emotions to abusive and non-abusive moms. And these were pictures of babies and children, different children. And you're supposed to say what the baby's feeling or what the child's feeling at the time. Abusive moms were less likely to correctly identify the emotion. The most common mistake they made was labeling negative emotions as positive. My baby's upset. The baby looks upset. That's me speaking. Abusive mom. Baby's happy. They're not paying attention to negative signals from their children. And I'm going to tell you what I think is also interesting is that abused kids have a hard time with emotion recognition as well. Kids who are physically abused have a hard time recognizing emotions. And in fact, they go kind of the other way. They tend to, they attribute much more negativity to emotions, okay? Even neutral emotions. But it seems like it's sort of a learned thing. Like, for example, for physically abused kids, what they suggest is that it's much more important for them to learn negative emotions. Because what is a negative emotion signal? Danger. You're about to get hit. And if you can figure out when mom's getting mad and get out of her way, you might avoid something. You might avoid getting hit. So some people suggest that they're hypervigilant for negative things in their environment, and so they learn the negative stuff. But they don't get a lot of practice with positive emotions, which you saw in those families. There was very little chance for those kids to learn positive stuff. So, yeah, so emotion recognition, another issue. Marital stability. This is in your book, domestic violence. We know this, that there's a connection between child abuse and spousal abuse. And in fact, some states define domestic abuse as child abuse. If a child witnesses domestic abuse, some states call that child abuse. So just to give you one study to show you how important this is. So this was a father-child interaction study. Wow, you don't get very many of those, okay? So these are fathers, okay, who had problems with spousal abuse. And they had researchers who were blind to which condition. You were either an abuser or a non-abuser. Spousal abuse. You have not been reported for child abuse. You've been reported for spousal abuse. And so you have domestic violence abusers and non-abusers. The most significant predictor of how well that father interacted with their kids was whether or not he was an abuser. So men who abused their wives had poorer interactions with their kids. And we know, for example, that kids who grow up in domestic violence homes have the same kind of developmental problems that you see in kids who are abused and neglected. Okay? Even if they're not personally hit themselves. So watching violence is bad. Okay? The last two things I'm just going to mention real quickly, because we know this. These are outside the family. The big one for us is poverty. There's only one type of abuse that's not associated with being poor. Does anybody know what it is?
Sexual abuse?
Sexual abuse, absolutely. That cuts across social classes. Especially in terms of types of abuse, especially neglect. Okay, here's a little chart. The incidence of neglect per 1,000 children in families who make less than $15,000 and families who make over $30,000. Wow. Big difference. And so we're going to be doing this a lot. We'll see this a lot. And then the final one I'm going to mention, and it's also mentioned in your book, is lack of support. Abusive families have fewer friends. They report having fewer friends. They have less support from their family in terms of like, respite, like mom takes care of the kids for a while or any kind of support. And they're less involved in their community, like less likely to belong to a church or an organization or know what services are in the community and things like that. So, support, lack of support. Now, this little thing right here, we got a chicken and an egg phenomenon here, okay? So, why don't they have as many? Is it the fact that they don't have support is why they abuse their kids? Or is the abusing the kids leading to the lack of support? So if, like some of these parents, although they don't have a mental illness or they're not intellectually impaired, they may still not be very nice people, okay? And so if they're not very nice, what would you predict that they would have fewer of? Friends, okay? And maybe even in the family? Yeah. So you can't tell whether the lack of support came from the parent being not a nice person, which also predicts them hurting their children, or if that lack of support is what's causing more pressure on the family.